Do you think that we're currently walking into a recession?
I think we're in a recession. I definitely think we need to be preparing for challenging times because...
Matt Jensen is the founder and CEO of M.J. Bale, one of Australia's premier menswear brands. With over 80 stores nationwide and an annual revenue exceeding $100 million, M.J. Bale is a pioneer in modern Australian tailoring.
Like 98% of our fibre selection is natural. Wool, silk, cotton, linen is what we do.
Matt has led the brand with a deep commitment to integrity, innovation, and sustainability, making M.J. Bale the nation's first carbon-neutral fashion label.
I think bringing it back to the community and sharing that story with our consumer is something that we hold dearly. I would like to be remembered for somebody who really put Australian wool and natural fibres onto the global stage.
And do you think that the fashion scene is losing its soul in some ways, or is it going through a renaissance in others? This episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. Matt Jensen, welcome to the Agency Podcast.
Thanks, Dane. Great to be here.
You've definitely built a brand with what I would term as a legacy. What I mean by that is it has a greater meaning than just the product that you can buy in store. And if you to zoom out and take in everything mentally and emotionally, what's been your perspective on what it takes to be an entrepreneur?
Wow, there's so many things there. Nice broad question to kick off. I like that. Gosh, you need to be really, really driven. And I think, and we'll get to this a bit later as well, but I think, doing it in Australia where there's high expectation and, an expensive environment. We live on the world's biggest island and it's paradise, right, where we live. We live in the best place in the world. But it comes at a cost, and things are expensive out there. So, as an entrepreneur, and to make it over the long run, you really need to there's lots of P's, right? So I'll run through a few P's for you. First up is your positioning. You've got to have sound positioning, because if you don't have that right, you then just try to get yourself back to a better positioning, and it's big and strategic work you need to do in the beginning to try and understand where you're at from a product point of view, how you're going to actually position yourself with your product into that market on price, on location, on brand positioning. You guys do this day in, day out and live and breathe it. So I hope I'm not telling you.
No, go ahead.
Today's
all about your take on this.
Yeah. So you probably see this with your clients as well. But getting that positioning right, and then having a really clear vision of what you want to do with your business is obviously super important. But then you've got to nail the product. And with one of the big challenges now, there's too much product in the world. There's just too much. There's way too much production capacity, and the manufacturing capacity and the engineering behind, whether it's food crops or whether it's how to get more yield out of cotton fields, or maybe it's some other form of production. But that all just cranks up the amount of product we've got in the world, and people want more and more and more. And I think when you've got that much product in the world, and you've also got the connectivity, the digital connectivity of the world, where in our space, in consumer products, and specifically menswear and men's clothing and accessories, you can shop from any brand anywhere around the world. So unless you have something to offer in terms of product, and our take is pretty simple, but it's got to be high quality. It's got to have some character and cool to it, and it also needs to be of natural fibres. I mean, we are fundamentally a natural fibers company, making garments of integrity for men of character, and so to hopefully give them joy and confidence that they can go out and venture out in the world and explore it. And if we can do that part of the equation, giving our customers joy and confidence, that's actually what fills me with great pride as an entrepreneur. But you've just got to get that product right, especially now because there's too much choice. Nike sneakers or brown suede shoes or, T-shirts or caps or jackets or whatever it is, or coffee, you got to be bloody good. So very hard to get off, beyond the first months or years unless you've got a good differentiated product. And if you want to sell it, and then you've got to think about, place, where am I going to sell it through? Is it going to be digital? Is it going to be B2B to C through a department store? Or am I going to set up my own shops? Or am I, going to do it by appointment or whatever that is? You've got to be really succinct in how you do that, and then understand the commercial metrics of making, funding that, right? Because that's expensive these days. Setting up a shop or building it or whatever, or you sell it to a department store, then the department store needs to make their margin, so they're going harder on you, and you get a skinnier margin, and then you got to sustain all that, into season after season. So being very clear on your channel to market is super important. Then people could have come straight after positioning and product, but you got to have a gun team. And maybe the gun team's you in the beginning. I mean, you ran this business on your own, right, for a while?
At the very beginning, and it was a couple months in where I had two people volunteer their time because I'd shared my vision, and they were like, I want to be a part of that.
Cool.
So we kind of had a very early onset of people, but I would agree with that.
People's at least 50% of the equation. More. Yeah, at least. Again, in our product game, it's at least 50% of the equation. And I've seen stores, right? Some of our stores have traded at a level, and then for whatever reason, the team changes. And I've seen a 50 to 70% uplift in the performance of that store. Dramatic, right?
Like same volume of staff, but a totally different outcome.
Just different people, better operators. So getting the team is critical. And of course you need team culture and dynamic, and everyone, we've got the barbecue test, right? So you want people to pass the barbecue test, and they come on in and you're happy to have a barbecue with them, and they're good people to work with. I think that's super important as well. The next pricing, you got to be really clever with your price, whatever it is. I mean, price, subset of that's value, which can be anywhere along the value curve. It can be cheap and presents good value, but equally it can be super expensive. I don't know, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, really good value because people honor that and want that for a long period of time, and therefore it's good value because it has scarcity, and people really love that. Last one's promotion, right? And I think it kind of links back to the positioning piece, but again, we're saturated. There's so much product in the world promoted in a bunch of different ways, and all the algorithms are feeding in, this sort of sea of sameness through the middle. Everything's coming to a singularity. There's this fascinating concept of economic singularity, which the AI is kind of pushing us all into. I have frustration with my Spotify music choice. I pick something else, and it still plays the stuff that I've got on my Good Tracks listing, and I'm like, I don't need that. I've got that on my Good Tracks listing. Oh, I want something fresh, but the algos push you back to this singularity, and it's all meeting in the middle. So there's a few different things there, but when it comes to promotion, you need, unique ad ideas. How many have we seen lately?
A tremendous uptake in new thought patterns and new ways of creating things, for sure.
Yeah. So you think we've seen good ones lately or not? I reckon there's been, maybe I need to pay more attention. But
I feel like there's an early renaissance. It's very early, and they're in pockets. But I would agree with you. Like, I've poured over one of my favorite things is like Porsche ads in the 70s and 80s, or if you go back through the books, and we've got a library here of old like advertising books, and the stuff they were doing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was exceptional. But I would agree with you. Everything kind of...
And it's pretty analog format as well, right?
Yeah, and everything kind of has converged into meta ads, SEO, Google ranking. Everything's quite structured and kind of, mild with the creative. But I think it's kind of... I feel like there's at least a burst of renaissance around rebelling against that system.
We put a bunch of our media buy, a lot of it, more than half, probably more like 70%. Our media is going to digital.
Okay.
Which is a lot, right? Probably too much anyway. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, trying to get that marketing right. We have an edge, right? Have something to say. And we've done some beautiful campaigns over the years. We won a gold lion at Cannes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When?
Which was really cool. Grazed on Greatness. I can't remember when. It was. It must have been 2010, 11, 12, 13. Anyway, Grazed on Greatness, where we took grass from the SCG. We're kitting out the Australian cricket team. And so we took grass from the SCG. We replanted it on a farm up in New England, New South Wales. Bill Mitchell, the wool grower, grazed his sheep over that grass of the SCG. We then shore the sheep, took that fleece, spun it, wove it into fabric that we then turned into the uniform for the Australian cricket team to play test matches back on the SCG.
That's exceptional.
So it was this cool circular idea, and credit to Brad as Paul Bradbury, my great old mate at TBWA, and his team who did that with us. And they won a gold lion at Cannes.
That's a remarkable idea.
It was cool.
Yeah.
And apparently Nike were at Cannes going, we want a little bit more of that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We want a bit more of that.
They would have been like, damn,
yeah, so that was cool. That was really cool. But yeah, anyway, I think maybe you're right. I think it could easily be time for, Brad has always says it to me as well. He's like, no, it's time to do something really cool. But it's all meeting in the middle. So there's a lot there. But gee, you and then personally, you got to have discipline to go and an amazing support network. My wife and family have been incredibly supportive over the years. I've built businesses, blown them up, built businesses again, and thankfully this one's going really well. So, my wife's a legend, Louise. She's insane, and I'm just super fortunate to have her as a partner in my life. And
yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this before. So you got to have that personal stuff. I mean, out front you've got the work things, but if things are not well organised on the family side, what are we doing this for?
It's a good point, because I think we've probably both met people on both sides of the equation. I'm blessed to have Ellie, and she's had my back no matter what. Whether it's a 10-hour day or a 19-hour day, she's like, "What do you need? It's
cool.
I'm here for you. Everything's okay. I got you." If I go home in a bad mood, she'll tell me to go back to work. So she's a badass man.
Door again.
A real salt of the earth country girl.
Yeah, that's good.
So I'm very blessed. And but I think some of the things you were touching on there around the different P's, I think you're absolutely correct. And I would agree with this convergence of this economy kind of pushing itself into one kind of linear way of thinking. Do you believe it's going to actually converge, or do you think that humans will find a way to kind of bring creative flair back into the market when it comes to how advertising is being treated?
There will. I mean, there's always that pendulum swinging from one side to the other, right? And I think that, zig when they zag, or zag when they zig, whatever it is, I think that's important. But when things are so tightly calibrated as they are now, which fundamentally comes down to tightness of capital and liquidity and the ability for people to take risks, that just gets harder, or just fewer people are prepared to take risks. And it's sad. I don't see I mean, there's a few coming through. However, I also see a lot going by the wayside, and they can't sustain it from a capital or process or operations point of view. And some incredibly talented and great people have not followed through with their business ambitions recently in our consumer goods space, and it's sad because they were world class, absolutely world class in what they're doing, and you just think, oh, given another time or a set of circumstances or business conditions, that getting the timing right and being able to sustain it over a longer period of time, it's just a shame. So I'm concerned about that. Again, world's biggest island, incredible place to live, but we're losing that spirit of entrepreneurialism because it's tough on people. And I think this fundamentally comes, sorry, I don't want this to sound all too negative, but this fundamentally comes from...
Go in the rabbit hole, man. People need to hear it.
I just think it fundamentally comes from the price of property, and then how wages link back to price of property and the ability to play ball in that environment, because it's so overwhelming. They're your biggest costs, right? Rent in our space and wages, they're the largest cost. So because that trickles down through everything, the price of your logistics company, it trickles down into the price of hiring and retaining talent, of doing things, opening a store, getting a builder to come and build that store for you. They're all really expensive. So people are not scaling these businesses, and maybe they get a bit of success and they get up to $1 or $2 or $3 million, and then they've got to cash flow the next season or the next store or whatever else. And it's like there's sticker shock in terms of, so I need another $250,000 or whatever it is to roll that store or to buy that new range to sell it into wherever. And the margins are tight. So I look at the whole margin stack of this, and unless you are working on really good first margins, it's very hard to sustain a consumer goods business and grow it. Or you're de-risking it and you're just reselling someone else's thing at a lower margin, but you're not taking that risk on.
Business owners, if you're stuck using one platform for every project, you're probably stuck in a growth bottleneck. More clients means more hires, which just adds noise and cuts into profits. To break the loop, you need flexible tools that don't stretch your resources. Wix Studio is a smart addition to your business toolkit. Intuitive by design, your team can quickly master the platform and focus on the work that matters the most. Then keep up the momentum with a built-in management tool, a unified dashboard, reusable assets, and a Figma plugin that turns static design into launch-ready websites. With robust native business solutions like bookings, e-commerce, and events, you can take any project at any scale without the added cost of third-party plugins. Plus, Wix Studio is a low-maintenance platform, meaning you can redirect the client budget towards real growth initiatives. Think more value for clients, steady income streams, and stronger relationships. To get started, simply go to wix.com/studio. You could say that launching a business today is easier than ever. At the same time, you could say it's equally more difficult than ever. I would say that it's very different to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, hell, even 2 years ago. Things were a little different. Do you think that we're currently walking into a recession?
I think we're in a recession. Absolutely in a consumer recession. And, Alan Kohler, great economist and business commentary guy on the ABC News, he calls it all the time. He says, a per capita GDP is going backwards. If you think, and net immigration of 700,000 or whatever it was last year, that's the thing propping up those GDP numbers. The other thing is, government spending circa 30%. I think it's just shy of 30%, 27 or 28% of GDP. And we all know the government's just throwing money out there.
What do you mean by that? Just to really explain that, what's happening with that.
So if you've got a GDP number of, call it 3%, basically 1% of the 3, just shy of it, is coming from government spending. And then the rest of it is coming from inbound migration, which grows the activity. But if you look at the actual existing, call it like for like, either people who were living here 1 year, 2 years ago, that group of people, and of course some segments of the community are doing better, others are doing not as well. But on aggregate, that's going backwards in terms of that GDP number. So I definitely think we're in a recession. I see it in stores. I mean, we're doing well to hold on to our numbers, and we're just flat, right? And we're working so hard, and we talk about execution and teamwork and all, and doing the extras, and we've got an established business, and we've got a fantastic client base and great store network and superb people in the business, and we're super fortunate for that. And we're only just standing still. Yet rent is going higher, and wages are compounding higher, and other things are compounding higher. So it's really hard. The equation is so finely balanced. I sort of say it's priced to perfection.
Do you think it's getting harder for business owners to actually manage, operate, and build companies?
Depends on your space. I think you can be capital light and clever and nimble, and maybe you can do that. And I think the digital economy is probably different. But those heavy CapEx things where you're actually constructing or building things or putting in big networks to then, generate a revenue, that's hard. And you need a big balance sheet to do it. So I think that for entrepreneurs, they're having, and let's say small scale entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I've been there, you've been there. They really need to be on their toes and super nimble and clever to grow and sustain even a small to medium sized business, which I don't know is what, $5+ million or something. That's hard to get it out of the ground. You know this.
Oh yeah,
it's hard to get out of the ground. But then there's and this this is another thing that my great friend Mark Johnson Sherlock has taught me is this, you've got these brick walls as you go through, and you hit brick walls, and unless you can actually navigate that, which could be around systems and processes, could be around capital, could be around, getting that new leg up of scale to fund the team and everything that you want to add or need to add, you can blow up a business. I mean, I hit a brick wall at $20 million in my first business, and the GFC hit, and we were two founders without a shareholder agreement. And we'd done really well to this stage. It was great. And then it was a disaster. And we had to put the company in administration. We sold it to a European company, and I moved on and started M.J. Bale after that. But you can do a $20 million business and hit a brick wall, and it's gone quite quickly because the leverage within the cash flows are just bigger, positive and negative. And then you hit a demand shock like that, GFC, and you don't have the capitalization or balance sheet to sustain your way through that kind of shock, then you blow up your business.
Two things there. Can you just briefly explain what exactly the GFC was and what that meant for businesses? And you're mentioning the balance sheet. What do you mean by that as well?
Yeah, sure. GFC, so global financial crisis, and that was all related to just excessive leverage in fundamentally the US housing system.
2008, right?
And bad mortgage books that were written with underlying assets that were great movie on it, The Big Short, cracking movie.
Beautiful movie.
Great movie. And the assets weren't worth the paper they were written on, the houses that then, they were sold and sold and sold and sold and resold and bundled up. And it was just a liquidity crunch. But what that meant, the Aussie dollar went to 50 cents to the US. So our imports were crazy, expensive, and consumers were really scared. It was a demand shock, kind of like COVID, or even though it was out there in the US. It came through the whole financial system, and what everybody was worried, the global financial system, what everybody was worried about is this domino effect of who owned these bits of paper that these rubbish, underlying securities of the paper, who owned them, and therefore was that going to put a bank out of business, and was there then going to be a run on the banks And there kind of almost was, and then the governments came in and backstopped it all by supporting the banks and saying, we will nationalise your losses and we'll look after you. And then everything got back again. But it was a really highly traumatic time for many people. And as a consumer-facing business in Australia, where demand fell, the currency went down, we didn't have the capital to sustain it, but we had ongoing running costs. We blew the business up.
So consumers were not buying anymore. You're paying for all the overheads. You're managing a $20 million operation with 2 other business partners.
Yep.
What was going through your head when this was all taking place?
Oh, shit. This is real. This is real. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty gnarly. My wife was heavily pregnant with our 4th child at the time. And we'd gone, because 6 and 7 were kind of good years, and we were marching through the teens of, talk about hitting the brick wall and getting to 20 mil. But, 12 through 18 felt pretty good. And, we had a few people come and say, we'd be interested in buying your business. And we're like, no, we're fine. We're good. We're going just fine. So I just don't think, as a young entrepreneur back then, I'd built the sufficient metal and rigor into the business that I needed to. And we were just stretched because we were doing men's and women's, and we had a high cost base to do the men's and women's. And again, right idea, good idea, timing bad, execution not where it needed to be to go through the storm, which it ended up being a storm, and relatively short-lived storm. I don't know, say 6 months, GFC. But it was brutal when you saw that demand literally dry up really quickly. So yeah, it was pretty full on.
Are you seeing similar? Go ahead.
But it was also my greatest learning experience, because as part of that, one of my greatest learning experiences, as part of that, and the oh shit moment when then I was working at night and going, right, we had to lay the staff off, right? So, which is devastating. Good people. We had to lay a bunch of people off. And I'm like, okay, well, I reckon we can re-steer the business in a better direction, but it needs to look like this, which was better on price, tighter on product assortment, focused on key doors and locations, working with the right wholesale department store, and tighter team, good, hungry, tight team with some new capital coming in. I reckon we can get this going again. And I felt like I had that feeling of, I used to play rugby when I was younger, and I love team sports. So it was like being down on the scoreboard at halftime, but I felt like you could come back and put points on the board the second half and win the game. And so that was the feeling in my mind. And I don't know, stubborn enough, stupid enough, wanted it enough to then, so I just went really hard on building these Excel spreadsheets to retool the business. And it gave me this analytical view of where the business is. And I was okay on Excel, but I got quite into it at the time. And I was also meeting with the smartest guys, because everyone knew we were toast. They're like, this business is going in administration. and then was in administration. And so I was meeting with smart guys, smart rag traders who were fine and had the balance sheet and had the assets and had everything kind of plugged in and could withstand the storm. And they were like, you got this, you got that, you got this, and I'm like, no, I don't really have that. Okay, so I was just making a mental note of all these different things that I then would go back and kind of retool the business model for what I thought would be appropriate for the new post-GFC world. So it was a really excellent thing to have learned. And, it's actually, it was foundational in terms of how we've come out and built MJ Bale now.
Are you seeing similar signals in the market right now with what's happening?
No, I don't think so. There's this macro thinking that the central banks have got the macroeconomics thinking that the central banks have kind of got the backs because they do the money printing, the backs of the community and the banks and everyone. And what they do is they cut rates and they add more dollars into the system, or euros into the system, or Chinese yuan or Japanese yen into the system, and it floods it with capital, and everything kind of gets washed over. The problem is, though, with that additional money printing, the hurdle rate of just to stay in the same place year on year on year is around 8% because of the devaluation of the currencies. So do I think that's the case now? No, I don't think so. I don't think it is the case now. I mean, I'm a hardwired optimist, but I'm also a realist, and I think that so long as the collateral of the system, and that's equities and property, doesn't get a big collateral shock, then things will continue on. I think it'll be hard, though. I definitely think it'll be hard, and maybe we'll go into recession. Yeah, maybe we will.
So if you think about the competition, and there's that term that a high tide rises all ships, equally a low tide can harbor ships in the sand. If the tide's going out and people are starting to get bogged and sink into debt and ask favors and fret and pull back spending, it seems like potentially competitors at large would be contracting or shrinking or playing it safe right now. What advice would you have for someone who wants to take advantage of the competition in whatever their space is?
Kind of back to the beginning, work with your team, work with your team and as a team. And I love it. And again, Mark Bilton, I know you had him on the pod the other day. He's exceptional. Legend. He's a legend. Mark.
He's exceptional.
So we get in a room with Mark once a quarter, and all our heads sit down, and we have these 90-day sprints and the Stragile piece that Mark talks to. And everyone puts their views forward, and we talk about, kind of a different version of a SWOT, right? But strengths, weakness, opportunities, threat, and what should we do more of and less of, and how do we stay agile and strategically agile in challenging environment. And I just think pull your team in, and because the IP within your team, and again, we've got a retail business and an e-com business and a uniforming business where we kit out Socceroos, Aussie cricket team, Wallabies, other elite sporting guys. They know what's going on. Your team knows what's going on out there. They've got it, and they're smart people. So you got to get in there, and then I think devise that plan, and then you just got to work. You got to work and be clever. But I think it's not all a doom and gloom story, right? Again, back to my point of we live in paradise, but the equation is tighter. I was talking to a lovely guy this morning. He's in the industry as well, and he said it's just really hard to make a profit at the moment. And I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. Everything's priced to perfection, but it's really hard to make a profit at the moment.
If you look at the market right now, customers seem to want or be looking or demanding cheaper prices, more ethically made products, higher quality. Is this realistic to be able to sustain low prices with all of these other things that consumers are now expecting in products these days?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because if you talk about sustainability, right? Sustainability costs. You need to ensure that the provenance of a product, it's clear where you've sourced the product from. You need to be clear that it is made in a way with the correct labour force to sow things and humane conditions to make things and bring them to market. And to do that all has a premium. You then need to ensure that you've got the correct distribution for that, and it does add up and it does cost more. I think, rewind 15 years, right? Organic food was less abundant. Organic food was less abundant 15, 20 years ago. Now there's more of it, but it comes at a premium. So the same's in, food or fibre. You've got the same things going on. Great wool growers in Tasmania with a 16 micron product like Simon Cameron, fantastic fellow. We've been working in Kingston Farm where we have a single source merino that goes up to Italy. We weave it, we make it into suits, we sell it to our customers, and we give a rebate back to Simon because we want him to be sustainable over the long term. He's a 6th generation wool grower. He won the Xenia Prize a couple of times now. He won it this year and he won it last year, the year before as well. And when you've got that level of elite wool growing, you've got to take care of it. So, on Simon's properties, 3% of the natural grasslands that are still left in Tasmania.
Wow.
And he's out there constantly taking care of that. He's here in Sydney and he's down in Tasmania, down near Ben Lomond there out of Launceston, constantly looking after that property to ensure that he can hand it on to the next generation in a way better than he found it. And we love that. From my point of view, Simon's a true gentleman, but we're helping him and this idea of grassroots community to keep his farm rolling in the most sustainable way into the next decade. But that all costs. That's really expensive stuff. And we want to support it, of course. We're proud of that. But it costs more. Back to your original point, it has to.
I know this strikes close to home for you because as I understand it, your father was involved in that in some way, shape or form. And I understand, and Josh has just mentioned this to me in passing, is that you have a story where you grew up kind of questioning how and why your father was essentially selling wool and not necessarily moving through downstream to make more money.
Yeah, and you're right. And Dad was a wool grower, is now no longer a wool grower. However, you could apply this to the whole industry where we would grow the finest fibre in the world. And Australian wool is, merino wool is revered globally as the best. And we never value added. And all the production, all the processing facilities moved offshore. There's a tiny amount of them left in Victoria. But you can't produce anything here fundamentally. And M.J. Bale, the concept of the bale is, we've got these wonderful natural fibres, the best in the world. Yet we sell bales. Bales of wool. And I wanted to go beyond what's inside the bale and how do we create that into a tangible product for our consumers to wear and give much better traceability and circularity of that product and value add it, not just as in a generic commodity, which the bulk of wool is just sold into market and off it goes, and traceability is improving, I've got to say. However, the bulk of wool is just sold into the general market. No one knows where it goes.
Okay. Do you think that having this purpose has driven you to build this?
Yeah, 100%. Purpose, but also I saw the opportunity. So, whilst, it's crazy, right? We're the country that grew up on the sheep's back and we didn't value add. It was like it was the most obvious opportunity to actually, and over the years we've partnered with Woolmark, and that's been great, and they've been really helpful with putting us in touch with better wool growers and product development and marketing and different things. But we need to do more. The wool grower out there is depends on your scale, but largely at break even. At these prices for merino wool, you're pretty much at break even. And our wool growers, to sustain these family farms, these are big communities in our culture, in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, all around the West Australia, Eastern Seaboard. we need to look after them. And at the moment, the wool price is not at a premium such that farming communities are making a profit out of it. So the value adding thing was obvious to me, and I wanted to do more, and we have ambition to continue to go further. Like what's natural fibers company, like 98% of our fiber selection is natural. Wool, silk, cotton, linen is what we deal in.
If you look at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, it makes sense. We have this resource that's not completely capitalized on.
Yeah.
Would logically make sense. You're also talking about something that means something to you, that you feel that beyond making a profit, beyond building a brand, gives you some sense of purpose or fulfillment.
Yeah.
If you look at a business, I guess, from ingredients, cash flow being one of them, what else do you think you need to really make sure that the engine keeps humming and that you can sustain yourself through hard times?
I reckon that idea, it was awesome hearing you and Josh talk about it last week. There's that the universe. It's a Buddhist concept, the universal law of nature, which is the creative, maintenance, destruction. And I think you just need to keep putting the accelerator on the creativity, and then make sure you've got the maintenance structures there. You've got to lead with creative and maintain. And then destruction doesn't come on unwantedly or in a tragic way that ruins your business. So I think keeping those two in check, super important to keeping the momentum and the locomotive going and building. And also that I think that probably does go back to your energy point. So which one's, it's probably the energy that then brings the cash. So I think you're right. That's the derivative of the energy. So you've got to drive that creative maintenance to keep the furnace going so that you keep that momentum rolling.
Especially in the beginning, I think there's been times in my business where, early on there would be challenges with cash flow.
Yeah.
And certain people on the team would say, there's nothing we can do about this. And as the entrepreneur,
you were like, yeah, there is.
You're like, there fucking has to be.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what is it? And you're like, we'll figure it out. But I think sometimes in entrepreneurship, that's the whole point.
Yeah. We'll find a way.
It's not easy, but your head is constantly in this state where you're like, I'll figure it out. Yeah. And it has to be part stubborn, part stupidity, but part creativity. And I think that requires a tremendous amount of energy to persevere when it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well said. I think that's spot on.
Yeah. Now, to the creation piece, what exactly do you mean? Like, what is it that a business owner can do to be proactively creative?
Kind of back to the original, I think you got to constantly review the product or service that you're selling and making sure that you're doing it in the best possible, optimistic, happy way that keeps your customers coming back for more. I think that's number one, right? Beyond that, challenge your thinking, bringing the team in. What do they think? Researching with your customers. What do they think? Creating could also be entering a new market. We're looking, on the back on the back of this world's biggest island, wonderful place to be, but gee, it's expensive here. I'm looking offshore now.
Okay.
And I look offshore and I see a bunch of opportunity because there's more people who are being potentially underserviced by the incumbent brands we're up against. And I think having grown up in, I think we've got an edge on our natural fibers and provenance story and product storytelling. And then I think when you bundle all that together, we can outperform them because we've grown up in the mean streets of Australia.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's tough here. It's tough to grow and scale a business in Australia because you've got, all the things we spoke about before working against you. And so then you look at international markets, and that's not easy, by the way. You got operationally, you got to execute and be clear on it. But my real belief, and there's some fantastic examples, right? Rufus Du Sol in music, Aesop skincare, fragrance, Zimmerman, women's fashion, all world class. You know, R.M. Williams boots, great boot, world class, leads their categories. Look at some of our athletes. Look at, you know, we've got a high performing, high functioning country and talent here that can totally export to the rest of the world. And I think, you know, Aussie conditions steel companies for performance overseas.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's hard. You know, again, back to the point of if you can do retail in Australia, I think you can. If you're good at retail, I think you can do retail with the best of them, so long as you've got the correct assets around your business: balance sheet, people, processes, systems, formula, creativity of how you display the store, product that can, you know, beat the competitors. You can totally win in overseas markets.
Yo, my name's Dane Walker and I am disgustingly obsessed with branding. I had to figure out a way to do branding every single day, so I branded myself. Then, I started my agency, Rival. And hired a team of branding mavericks hell-bent on creating brands so good that they'll make your competition their pants. So here's the thing, you want your brand to go viral and Rival makes brands go viral. That's why we're offering you a free 30-minute branding session to get an expert's opinion. If you don't believe me, the proof is in the pudding. Here's what clients have to say about Rival.
Rival is trusted by brands like Nutrition Warehouse, Light My Bricks, and Vumi.
So if you want to absolutely smoke the competition and make your brand go viral, hit the link below and book in your free 30-minute branding session.
If you look at M.J. Bale and you look at the market that you entered, obviously, and we shouldn't name them all, but there's a lot of men's brands in the Asia Pac. What made you feel that like we can do this, we can truly bring something different, and how were you looking at taking on this part of the market originally?
So I grew up as in this. I went to UTS, I did a business degree. I majored in marketing, international trade and marketing. But then I worked in London, 93 to 97, and I was out there in London, and I was working in the finance. I was working in the city in the finance industry, and I just really liked the whole vibe of London with vertical retail brands, where a brand would put in its own stores rather than selling through a department store. And so that's how I it gave me the interest to start a clothing business. But back in my old herringbone days, we had our own factory in Surrey Hills.
Wow.
Making shirts. We'd knock out 500 shirts
Here?
a week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and Bernadette and Maggie and Rosa would run the factory, and our offices were there, and at level 2 to 12 Favo Street. And they were good days, you know. And we were making, so I learned from the cutting floor up, right? And so I spent time with our seamstresses, who were all old school seamstresses and knew how to make a wonderful shirt. When you have that knowledge of garment making in the correct way, and you have your own taste level and, you know, quality expectations, I think you got an edge, right, over many who are just kind of traders of generic stuff, whatever that is. So I just felt I had a better idea of that, you know, creating an authentic product of integrity. And so when I looked at the competition, I'm like, I can do that, and I think I've got the right idea on fit, on fabrication, on quality, on stitch count, on button, and how to make, you know, the right aesthetic appeal of the products. But also, I want to bundle it in a way that's better value. I want better price, but also better product. So price times quality, service, and brand is the value equation in the way I see it. And I think if you just look at the metrics of what that is, if you're great on service and you're actually telling that to the consumer, and this is a wonderful thing about menswear, that guys come back for the same thing season after season, year after year, and they honor that if you respect them and take good care of them. And I think that makes it a lovely linear business to be involved in. A small anecdote. So I go out and I see the all our weavers of the fabrics in Europe twice a year. And every time I go, you see all the like rock stars of the men's clothing industry. They're all there on day one or day two of the fair. They've all got their own little time preferences. And they're there. And so the Napolitana tailors with the cousins and the grandfather and the father and the other kids, they're all there. There's like 6 of them around looking at the set of fabrics for the new jackets for the season. Xenia's, Paul Smith, Laura Piana, like they are all there. Brunello Cucinelli, all the absolute rock stars of the fashion industry are at these fairs just doing their thing.
Why?
Just doing their thing because they're product people. Fundamentally, they're product people, and it's also often a family business. I mean, for those guys, they're founder-led or family businesses, and I don't know. They're just why I think A, they're passionate, they love it, but B, it's what they do, and they're exceptional at it. All the best ones, they've got their hands on the wheel. All the major brands in menswear, they've got their hands on the wheel. Phil Knight at Nike.
Product obsessed.
Yeah. And when he was in there, it was killing it, right? Now a few other people have gone through and then they've had, the share price has changed a bit. But it's gone down. It's not performing as well. But when Phil was in there, it was killing it, right?
Yeah. When you look at these people at these fairs and you're seeing 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation families investing in this trade, the rag trade, and they're at these events globally, and they're all kind of in the same kind of rooms, we're weaving through the same types of networks and relationships. Yeah. Do you think to yourself that those that try to get into the game purely out of, I want to create monetary gain here, I'm going to create a brand, I'm going to import products, I'm going to market it really well. Do you see that as a disadvantage versus those that genuinely love creating fabrics and selecting the cuts and investing obsessively into the nature of the product?
Yeah, I think if you're in the clothing game and the retail game, you've got to be obsessed about the product, like and looking after your customers. And there's actually some other great people here in Australia who are doing a good job in custom tailoring, and they're really focused and looking after what they do, and they're passionate about what they do, and come with the right mindset, I guess, to really servicing their clientele. I mean, I mentioned the Zimmerman girls before. Fantastic, right? I mean, Nikki and Simone, they're still in the business.
If you take this product-led approach and this philosophy about how you like to see it, how do you break it down into a science? Like, take me deep into how do you look at product creation? For you in your space, what are the things that make it, that allow you to understand this will do well in the market, this won't, this is how we're going to sell, this is where fashion's going? Like, how do you really zoom in on what makes that magic work?
We're kind of fortunate, again, menswear linear business, and it doesn't maybe, jump around as, say, women's wear does. Early because you see these affirmative cues. You understand, like, systems and reports help you understand what sold in the last 12 months, last season, things.
Right, historical data.
50% of our, roughly 40 to 50% of our business is pretty much core business. The guys coming back, I'll take the navy suit, white shirt, tuxedo, chinos, denim, jean, whatever, polo. There's a lovely consistency, which is one of the things I like about the menswear business, because it's kind of that annuity business that rolls year after year. So risk adjusted, it's not so volatile. You can plan that in. So that's all about delivering the milk on time to the stores and making sure you got it there, ready to look after your customer. And then, as your members or customers come in, making sure that you're doing a great job looking after them and fitting them in the best possible way. When it comes to the seasonal products, that's when you got to say, right, what is it? Is it green? Is it orange? Is it, mauve that's going to sell now? And so you sort of run color analysis, you run silhouette analysis. This is part of the problem though, because it's all regression analysis. So go back to singularity. Everyone kind of looks the same. And you know Mr. Porter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Porter puts it up and people go looking at what that is, and sure enough, there's derivatives of that stuff and things kind of look the same. So one of the challenges of this immense digitization and e-commerce world that we live in, you don't get unique character. That's why I love Japan, because you still have a lot of character on the streets where people get dressed up in different ways, and they really, from a styling point of view, they take it to the nth degree, and they're really precise and cool about what they do in all sorts of ways, right? There's a sea of sameness in a way out there that is part of the challenge, and you need to creatively challenge that to find some new space. You see it in sneakers, you see it in menswear, you see it in women's wear and nice dresses and things like that. And again, Net-a-Porter, Mr. Porter, great businesses, but they've kind of made it all the same.
Okay.
And then department stores make it all the same. And the merchandise planners are really powerful in clothing businesses. And I'm constantly having the chat with our team, fantastic merch planners and great people.
What exactly is a merch planner?
A merchandise planner, again, they're kind of like a portfolio manager of if you super fund and you put some into that stock and some into that stock and some into that stock. So they'll look at your different categories of, say, jackets and shirts and trousers and whatever, knitwear, and they'll say, righto, we sold like this and we saw this kind of growth rate. We think moving forward, we're putting in these stores, and they'll look at it at a size level, at a SKU level, at a style level, at a geographic regional level, from a color point of view, and they'll pull up what their view of the merchandise plan, which is kind of like your investment strategy for the future season.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but this is you've got to have a dynamic debate on that. Otherwise, everything just looks the same year after year, and it can't. There's again with menswear, there's a consistency that people like that, but you've got to keep pushing a bit and to make it fresh and keep it in. You've got to create and maintain, right? So you've got to push a bit more on the envelope. So I always say, working with our product and buying team, I'm like, you've got to get a little bit uncomfortable. You've got to get a little bit uncomfortable, and you guys aren't going to like this. Like, this is, it's not going to be an obvious investment decision for us to make on this set of products. So we have to keep pushing that envelope a bit.
What are some things that you're doing now with your team to try to push boundaries in fashion?
Our provenance, provenance sourcing from a really specific location, I think that's world class. No one else is doing that in the world, literally. What we're doing, and there's a bit of because fine wool is harder to come by, and the amazing farms, and we're super fortunate to be working with Simon Cameron down there in Tasmania. And we're also talking to another wonderful farmer in New Zealand, South Island, New Zealand, about a program that's coming through there. I think doing more of these direct sourcing things and then bringing it back to the community and sharing that story with our consumer is something that we hold dearly, and we've done it for many years now, and we'll continue to do more on that. And then we like to do made in capsules. So we did a made in Japan. You should check out the Japanese denim we did.
I'll check it out.
Very cool. We did this wonderful little made in Japan capsule. Next stop for us is made in Italy. We're doing a made in Italy capsule of some just a little edit of product. That's cool. So you're working at a really deep level with some specific masters of their craft, so that you provide a really authentic product. I think that's really important to us to do that. I mean, we provide a main line that is authentic and very consistent, and we think it's of high quality and high value for our customer. But it's lovely to do these extra little projects where you're collaborating with Japanese artisans and Italian artisans to do their things, and we'll continue to move that around to different locations in terms of sourcing. And that's one of the nice things that having a few stores and a bit of scale behind the business enables us to do. You can think like a boutique, but you're not risking it all on your one boutique,
And okay, so when it comes to what you've built with MJ Bale, how much of this do you think is branding versus product quality? And I separate them momentarily because a lot of business owners believe they truly have the best product. I think your product is fantastic, world-class, world-renowned. You're using incredible materials sourced from a very beautiful narrative, and it stems back to your purpose in your childhood and in the best possible way. But when you think about the branding element, how important is this in fashion? For example, if I buy a suit from this retailer, I become this type of person, versus a suit at that retailer, I become a slightly different type of character. It's almost like I'm subscribing to a different tribe, if you will. Surely a large portion of the market are just like, the suit looks great, it fits, great. But the people that obsess over returning, I'm going to ride or die MJ Bale or Mr. Porter or what have you.
I like it.
How important is the branding?
Yeah, branding's super important. I mean, perception's reality. Key point of that branding. And again, back to you think about vodka or tequila or beer. It's kind of fundamentally the same product inside. I mean, to slightly better or slightly worse quality-wise. But branding can be huge. Was it Clooney who did that tequila brand and flipped it for $1 billion or something? And he did an amazing job on Casamigos. He was part of that Casamigos thing. Beautiful branding, I think branding is super important. And
Ryan Reynolds did it with, I think it was a vodka brand.
Yeah, totally.
Matthew
and that's
McConaughey.
all branding and positioning and aspirational marketing, right? So it's a really good question to think about for a bit, because branding's huge. Branding's huge. But if your product doesn't live up to the hype, it's pretty short-lived. Don't you think?
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's not either or, it's definitely both.
Yeah, and Nike's made some of the best campaigns ever. Wonderful, goosebumps stuff. But if your Nikes don't live up to what you want them to be comfort-wise, or they wear out too fast, or, I don't know, a rivet's not right or something, that's a problem. And you lose customers pretty quickly. This idea of raindrops to build a brand equity, and buckets, how fast you lose it in buckets if you've got a product fail. So I think it takes a lot of effort to build that brand, and I think branding is seriously important. But equally, it's short-lived if your product doesn't deliver.
When everyone else is kind of going the mainstream route of like import a good product, export it, you're talking about getting on the ground, touching the product, talking to the families, bringing in this authentic narrative. I think that's exceptional when it comes to branding.
Yeah.
What additional edge comes through the actual artistry of caring about creating a beautiful jacket or a certain cut in the pants? Like, take me into the artistry of like, what is it that you really think about when you're trying to create a gorgeous product for men globally?
I think you really need to ensure that the fits are correct. Fit's critical, right? Beyond the material that's coming in to be, like sourcing of material is critical. Whether it's yarn to knit a t-shirt or a jumper, or whether it's a bolt of fabric, a roll of fabric to then be cut up and sewn into a woven product, which is a shirt or a jacket or a pair of trousers or whatever. Fit, form, and detail is important, and then construction techniques. That's kind of the simple summation of it.
But what's fit, form, and detail? Go into that.
Yeah. So on a fit point, it's really ensuring. Think about men's body shapes, right? And our guys are quite athletic. Here in Australia, there's a lot of people who work out, train, like to look good, and there's a certain vanity in it as well, right? So they want that fit form piece to be just so. So it's the drape over the shoulders, through the small of the back, how it works on your chest. Australians are often bigger in the shoulders and chest than, say, Asian countries and Japanese. Like they're much leaner. French guys are small, like they're more petite in the way they cut a garment. But so we build that athletic fit here for our products. And I think once you've got that part and you're really mastering how the garment looks on the body and on the person, that's critical for the consumer. That's critical. So we spend a lot of time on that. And you're never done. You're always evolving. Like, shoulders softening up a bit, or we'll put a bit more form in it, or we'll drape it a bit more. And now, of course, big times in menswear is getting bigger again. It's all looking a bit 80s, 90s, bigger silhouettes. So we're having to evolve and make them a bit less lean and, a bit fuller in the body. And the young guys are wearing, wider leg trousers and things. So I think getting that right and staying relevant on that journey of fit and form is super important. The detail part sort of goes back to that character and authenticity that I like to put into products. And the way they, where which a buttonhole is sewn or a button is hand stitched on and cross stitched and with the loop on the shank to make sure it comes through the buttonhole really well and feels comfortable there. And it's just these smaller points of detail. And then you don't want buttons falling off. That's the other thing. That's kind of a killer.
I always have buttons fall off my suits.
When I see that, it's a killer. It's like, oh, God, it kills me. Anyway, but the trim, like what's there, those little things when someone opens the jacket or in a shirt or whatever else, so to give it a sense of character under what you're trying to put across. And of course, it's highly subjective stuff. Some people like monotone and sleek and evening and really pared back. Other people like a lot of contrast or details or pattern or different things. But I think it's important to curate that personality in the range so that you're covering off the character of the range and making sure that product stands on its own as a beautiful piece. And then, the underlying quality of how things are constructed with the canvas on the inside, with the material that you're putting into collars. We don't fuse our collars because we don't like the way the glue bubbles when they go through laundering and things. But there's all these little peculiarities of building a product that gives it that character to make it more comfortable, to make the wearer feel happier wearing it.
When you're trying to think about the cut and the fit and the market and where people are, if you bring the brand and the product narrative together, what are some of the things that you've done to really pull this marketing system together? Because I understand you've got the physical retail and the e-com. My understanding is with tailored suits or suits in general, you have to have a retail presence.
I think it helps, yeah. That thing, and it was what we speaking about recently with marketing and brand, which one's the greater, and what, and it's a fascinating thing to think about. But the other way to consider it is the product is the brand is the product, and they work in lockstep, but it can become iconic, right? And that's the holy grail. I think if you can catch that, that's
like
an awesome business,
like the Ralph Polo, or the red bottom, shoes,
or WD-40, right?
Yeah.
I love WD-40. Works every time. If I could have shares in a company, I reckon I'd love to own WD-40.
If WD-40 is listening,
it does what
out.
It says it's going to do, and I just think it's a cool product, and and it's the branding. The brand is the product.
Yeah.
So I think that idea is super important in consumer facing businesses like ours, I just go back to that, that character and authenticity that you've got to have. And then, you also then need the team to pitch that. And that's where digital, team in a store to pitch it. And the store environment needs to rhyme with the product and brand promise. And then I like to think about the digital as that sort of efficiency. I think for guys, it's the efficiency. There's not much romance in shopping online, right?
Not really.
But if you can really nail the efficiency of, through the checkout process, through the information that's given to them, through the interface that you're putting through the experience you're putting through the interface, and then fast delivery, fast service, and making sure that they're getting what they want in an efficient manner, that's cool. And then ease of returns and all those things. I do believe the future is omni-channel, where you need physical to support the digital and digital support physical.
Have you found that they feed each other?
Yeah, and there's really good case studies on a bunch of different brands where as soon as you roll out more stores, then the digital penetration lifts. And if you do the right geo-targeting of your digital and start selling into those markets, if you put a store there, then the whole thing just turbocharges. So I think they need to go in lockstep. And there's a bunch of non-physical or online retailers who haven't necessarily made it through, right? A few have gone into been sold cheaply, or
well, we're
just
seeing this
not
happen.
performing.
We're seeing this happen a lot.
There's a consolidation going on.
What do you think is happening? Because you're seeing big brands that we've had for decades just go into administration almost overnight, and it seems to be happening everywhere simultaneously.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I mean, it's a removal of irrelevancy. It's destruction. It's the universal law of nature playing out, and it's not a bad thing, because you've got to have these storms that come through and clear the system out for the next gen to be able to come through and do a better deal on a store, have a bit more space in the market to be able to sell their product or service. So the storm coming through and wiping a bit out, destruction is not a bad thing. Look, if you're on the other end of it, it's a bad thing. If you're on the wrong side of it, it's a bad thing. However, it's great for renewal, right? And you see this on the plains in Africa. The Serengeti does it the whole time, right? There's that cycle of life. It's the universal law of nature playing out. And so I think the fact that there is a bit of a clear out of brands that are irrelevant now is not a bad thing, because there's too much product in the world.
Well, if you think about some of these brands, they've not really done anything in recent years, and they didn't do anything creative or clever. Yeah. They didn't update their stores. They lost relevancy. They didn't build influencer marketing campaigns. They just stayed on a previous generation's tried and tested campaign.
That's
now,
right.
In your case, you have over 80 stores.
Yeah.
And to manage that feels like an enormous amount of administration, logistics, hiring, HR, you name it. How do you make sure that with so many stores you keep this integral experience?
Yeah.
Like, how do you make sure that the customer from store to store gets the same experience, the same conversation with the clerks and the staff? Like, how do you make sure that system doesn't break?
I think training's really important on that. Again, you need a great team. So we've got a real structure of CEO. We've got myself, I'm CEO of the business. Got a COO, we've got a head of retail. We've then got regional managers who are looking after it, and then you've got store cluster managers who are looking after that. And then you've got a store manager and two ICs and casuals around that. So there's a true hierarchy of that. And like I was saying before, ideally you've got the right team on the bus. If you've got the right team on the bus, a lot of that stuff falls into line quite quickly. If you've got people who, and maybe, the great retailers aren't easy to find. And in Australia, it's not like Australia has this long legacy of retail businesses and retail businesses in menswear and tailored clothes, and garments that we sell. So you need to coach a lot of people. So training's vital, and making sure we're putting the right information and content in front of our team and working with them to deliver that. And then it's about service standards and all the good old-fashioned stuff of execution. And whether it's a restaurant business, a cafe, or a clothing store, I mean, I say to our guys, you can go and have the most amazing meal somewhere. If the service is bad, it ends up being an average meal. But equally, you can have a good simple meal, but amazing service. You walk away going, that was excellent. So I'd rather have, a better service-led business to complement our product business.
How do you make sure that your retail team have the right cultural prowess or the right talent or skill set? Surely training can help, but how do you make sure that that stays locked in place?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant challenge, right? Because you need to try and retain your best team in there. And everyone's got their own personal agendas. And I've worked with a bunch of people who've come in, worked with the business, and then got fed up for whatever reason. They've exited, and then they've come back again. And they've gone out, and they've come back again. So you just want to, it's relentless. You need great people and great hierarchy to then, especially around the country, in Perth and South Australia and Adelaide and Hobart and everything else. You're reliant on that team and that org structure really working for you. And then you want to look after them. We like playing games. So playing games of, business within a business. If their store's doing well, incentives are important. That's another thing. If the store's doing well, we want our people to do well as well. And I think especially now, it's always important, but especially now that's important.
And is it hard to run a business with strong integrity when the market can be so cutthroat?
No, I think you need to have more integrity when the market's so cutthroat. I think you need to lean on those values and make sure that that's correct. And you need to continue to challenge yourself in a cool way. So I think, look, we've said this a bit, Dan. There's no easy answers out there, but the integrity is so important, and making sure that the team are turning up and doing and enjoying what they're doing, and doing a great job is super important.
Now, more about you yourself. I understand that your team are exceptional, and I've heard many good things through Josh about them. Has entrepreneurship made you more patient or more ruthless?
Bit of both. Bit of both. I'm 52 now, so you start to see things through a slightly different lens. And my kids are growing up, and so I think it's made me more patient, but probably equally, I think I'm very clear about what I like and don't like, and I don't really want to debate that. It's just like let's just do it. And I think you've got to back your instinct on such things. Happy to hear a reasoned argument about it, if that's the case, but I think you need to be ruthless. And the other thing, the competitor in me, again, when I see that market opportunity, I want to be ruthless. I've got to be ruthless there, because, for example, you sign up on a 6-year rent deal, you need to really thrash that one out with the landlord. Westfield doesn't give you any free deals. And I love Westfield. Well, our stores in Westfield, not all, I'd say 85, 90% of them, fantastic. They're great operators. But you've got to be ruthless. To deal with Westfield, you've got to be very, very clear and back yourself in terms of signing that 5-year deal and getting in there and trading. They'll bring the traffic, but you've got to do your part and execute really well. So you've got to be ruthless. I don't think retail in Australia is, if you're not ruthless, you don't really prevail.
Why?
Because of the price of everything. And also the high expectation of our consumer. Like, we've got not just our consumer. I think the Australian consumer is not foolish. They're savvy. They're smart people, and they know what they want. And quite frankly, I believe as a service provider for them, the customer's always right. There's something really simple about that.
Yeah.
And so you got to play within that. That's the game we're playing. You got to play by those rules.
Why is it that, I guess, with the success you're having and your opinion and belief on business, and you've been doing this for some time now, why do you think so many founders quit when things stop being sexy, fun, exciting, and glamorous?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Good question. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's some personal trait of theirs. I think you need to be resilient as a entrepreneur. You need to be ready to fight the fight over a long period of time. I mean, we've been going 16 years now, and we've grown up. Our revenue's about 100 mil, and I really want to take it to the next level. But we're having to be really patient here, because contextually it's a grind out there, and we've got to keep building it out and work on those competencies that make the business more robust, such that we can come out when the market opens up a tad more. Then great, we can profit from that and continue to grow. But equally, I think call it karma or whatever else. Like, you've got to take your patience. Someone told me, a fantastic entrepreneur told me, just open up that box every day and take your patience pill.
Yeah.
That little imaginary box, take the patience pill, and then get back to work. And it's true, right? Like, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long period of time. So when it goes back to giving up, people giving up, okay, well, maybe they're just not cut out to be an entrepreneur. Maybe they're better off working for someone else. But don't.
What do you think was like one or two of the best painful lessons that you took into the new business that you're like, never again will I do X?
Again, I didn't really think about it like that. I just took those things on board and curated a new set of ruthlessness in my thinking, that I negotiated things harder. I mean, I got a shareholders agreement on this one. That's good. I've got partners on board. That's good. So, making sure you correctly capitalize. This is actually an interesting one. So we fundamentally in the old business, we're undercapitalized relative to what we were trying to do. So straight away in the new biz, I went out, I raised money with great friends and family. An old mate of mine, Matt Rogers, legend, came and said, righto, let's do this. Like, you want to do it? I said, yeah, I'm on. I've already got a little bit of business with David Jones and kitting out a few footy teams and stuff. What do you reckon? You want to put some money into a rag trade business in the middle of the GFC? He's like, wow, yeah, sort of, yeah, okay. and he's like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And then we'll raise some money. And the key point to make is it's a function of time or money. If you want to go faster, you need more capital. If you want to be patient, super patient, and have less capital in your business, and you're trying to fund it yourself but own 100%, then, okay, fine. It's going to take longer, and there's risk around it. So I think to answer your question is, right, I'm going to raise capital, going to do it really properly. All right, I'll own less of the business. However, we will be a robust business, and we'll take advantage of, and I'll have shareholders on board, but we collectively will take advantage of the market opportunity that presents itself to us in menswear, and I believe that I can go and do that. And thankfully, great people came on board, and we've got a dozen investors now, fantastic, long, patient capital that you want in your business. We've got an active board, 5 of us sit on the board, and we meet every month in a diligent way, and it's all really professionally run, like a mini public company, or private equity company in a way. And but we're able to take advantage of the market opportunity. And so owning less of a bigger pie was better than owning more of a smaller pie that was at risk.
That
So I
makes
think
sense.
That there's something in that. I mean, yeah, you're going to dilute, but if you've got the right synergistic investor on board, that's a good thing.
How do you make sure you get the right synergy?
I think they need to be able to provide value to you as the business operator and owner. And if they're going to come on board, I think it's hard for just to take on cash these days. Like unless there's a very clear pathway to an exit and a ramp up and then out, great, that's fine. But the hard work, and especially these days, is in the operations, is in the networking, is in the relationship building and delivering on the revenue. So ideally you want people with the synergies who can help you with your operations or with your revenue building or with the intelligence or the collective intelligence around the business, as well as the capital. And if you do that, I think that's how you find the synergies. But then you also want to make sure that they're, you want to, ideally you have shared values as well.
Yeah.
I think values is really important. I mean, if all of a sudden you're falling out with one another, that's not great. So being careful with the way in which you set up your shareholders agreement, et cetera, is also really important. Income, equity, control. This is a good one as well. Like, you've got your income, fine. Then you've got equity, and then you've got control. And they're three distinct things in a business. And if you can think about them independently and make your decision on those three things, how much control do I have? Operational or legal control. Equity, how much equity do I own in the business? And does that meet what I'm after? And then income, am I making enough money or, base short-term incentives, long-term incentives to keep me happy as a person? Then it's a good way to think about those things, because you're always going to trade off, right?
At some point, if you intend to build a company beyond yourself that's going to be inherited or what have you, this stuff has to be thought about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
In closing here, there's a few last questions. If you think about yourself in this space and what you're creating, how do you want to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered for the work we did to create wonderful products on our most famous fiber. And for somebody who was a visionary that really put Australian wool and natural fibers onto the global stage. And then the other thing is that as I said, I've got 4 children, for them to be able to benefit from that. And that's one of the things, how the business is shaped a bit differently now. It's interesting because they can come and learn in a really dynamic space. So that generational idea of giving your children an experience, I'm not bothered if they stay around in the business or not, or join the business or not. But hopefully they feel like they've got a landing pad there to then go and do what they're passionate about doing. And I think that's a lovely feeling, if, as opposed to going and getting a cold corporate job and bouncing around or sitting up looking at the light bulbs and going, what am I doing here? Big, small cog in a big wheel.
Yeah.
Thing. That anyway. So I think that, it's a nice thing to pass it on to other people.
And is there a quote or a mantra that you've carried with you on this journey that you wished all the listeners of today's episode would just carry with them on theirs?
Wow. I think there was a great thing I learned at uni, actually, that change is the only constant. I mean, the only thing you can count on these days is things are going to change. And I reckon it is even more true today than ever before because the rate of change is accelerating in almost an infinite way for everyone to grapple with.
That's a beautiful quote. It reminds me of this funny story that Jim Rohn shared, and he was in the boardroom at the Shell Corporation.
Yeah, right.
And they'd paid him to come in and do an analysis and a talk, and he was working around the room, and they all had questions for him around the future and how they should innovate as a company and what they can do to accelerate. And he goes, "I've got it." And they're all like gripping their notepads. And he says, "There's one thing you can expect around the corner in this business.
Yeah.
And that's change." And he's like, we're in a changing market. I think right now, everything's changing.
Yeah.
And if you can't change with it, you're going to get smashed. And I think that if you want to prove yourself as an actual entrepreneur, now's the time to do it. Yeah. There's no
like
room for the weak
I like that attitude.
in this market. I appreciate you being here. It's been
Thanks, Dane.
deep, insightful, thoughtful, meticulous, and just fascinating what you've built. And I love how much heart and spirit you've put into the narrative behind this and how authentic you're being and how much you care about, the men's fashion space and doing something important. And I agree with Josh. He believes you're creating a legacy. I believe it. And I'm excited to see where it goes when it goes to the US and that expansion. And we would certainly love to have you back.
Good on you. Thanks, Dane. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate.